David Gunter is a self-professed geek. You'll find him at planetautism.net and as a neurodivergence advocate on LinkedIn. I urge you to go find his work. He is not only warm, funny, but also someone who has navigated a late diagnosis and has come to terms with having found his exact niche, doing something he loves in a way that agrees with his autism. Let's listen together to our conversation where he touches on his experience and gives valuable advice for those of us who have yet to get there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to NeuroSpicy at Work. I have David Gunter with us today, and I am excited about having a conversation on what it is to be autistic in a certain specific field. So welcome to the show, David, and thank you for accepting to speak to us. Should I say, should it be David or Dave?
Oh, it's a pleasure.
What do you prefer to go? David.
David is.
I usually
David.
only use David when I'm very upset with the mister. If he's done something terribly wrong, it's David. Otherwise, it's Dave. But thank you for coming to the show, like I said. And there was a little bit of an intro before, but I'd like us to kind of go into it together and tell our listeners what it is that you do, not who you do it for, but what field you're in. And also, if you liked, to kind of walk us through what brought you to being diagnosed or self-diagnosed, however you wanna segment yourself in terms of disclosure.
Let me start with the second question first. Of course, I've been autistic my entire life. I did not know that until after I was 50 years old. I knew that I was different. I knew that I had trouble doing the things that seemed easy to everybody else. Walking into a room full of strangers and striking up a conversation was incredibly difficult. Even making eye contact was difficult. Just lots of things. Everyone around me seemed to know all of these unwritten rules that I didn't know, and so I was always bumping up against that, and being ridiculed for not knowing these things. So I grew up feeling very different. I didn't have a name to put on it. I thought it was depression, and there may be a component of depression in my mix somewhere, but I think a lot of what I was calling depression was actually autistic burnout. Like many autistic people, I like to stim, to manipulate objects, or my personal stim. I tend to tap out complicated codes on a table with my finger, complicated mathematical sequences with my fingers. I tend to get stuck on a word. Sometimes I'll say words that I don't really mean to say. So I took that to mean I had Tourette's syndrome. Involuntary movements, involuntary speech must be Tourette's. No, it was not Tourette's. I thought I had a social phobia for a while. Thought I had anxiety for a while. I chased a lot of diagnoses, and none of them really panned out. I did consider autism in the late 90s. But my idea of what an autistic person is the old Hollywood stereotype, the terrible, damaging, ridiculous stereotype that most people believe in. And I wasn't that, so there's no way I could be autistic. We'll just cross that right off the list. So after I turned 50, I was seeing another therapist for what I thought was depression. And just by luck, by coincidence, he had done some work with autistic children during his training. And eventually he sort of brought it up to me, one other thing that might explain some of this is, and I didn't want to hear it because, again, I had the Hollywood stereotype of what autism is, and I'm not that. I'm not some kind of whatever freak or whatever. That can't be me. But the more I learned and the more I read, okay, A, my definition of autism is completely wrong. And B, yeah, a lot of my characteristics do line up pretty well with this definition of autism. So, and that was a process. That was at least a year and a half of going from, no, there's no way that's me, to, yeah, that's me. And then I was content to stop there. I was confident that I knew who I was. But I got into a situation at work where I needed the official piece of paper with the doctor's signature on it that says autism. So I did pursue a formal diagnosis for that reason, but that didn't change. I had already figured out who I was, so that didn't change. To your first point, I am what's called in the US, it's called a medical writer. I work for a drug company. They run a study to see, hey, we have this new drug. Is it safe? Does it work? That study generates literally thousands and thousands of pages of tables and graphs and charts. And it's my job to sit down with those thousands of pages of charts and lists and whatever, and turn that into a coherent report that we can submit to the government to say, this is what happened. This is any safety incidents that occurred. Here they are. This is how well it worked, and this is what we think the next logical step is. So that's what the kind of medical writing that I do entails, and it's a great fit for me. People love to talk about the medical model of autism, the pathology model, the deficiency model. Here's the long list of things that people with autism can't do. Here's the long list of things they have trouble doing. But there is another list. People who are autistic tend to have, not always, but can have very good memory. They can have very encyclopedic knowledge on a specific topic that interests them. They tend to have better analytical skills, problem-solving skills. They tend to make decisions faster. They tend to make decisions more objectively.
Right.
And that's my job. I dive into all of this data and I sift through it objectively, and I say, what is the truth here? What is the story here? So it's a natural fit for me, and it works really well. Before this, I was in the U.S. There's the United States Patent and Trademark Office. If someone has a brilliant idea, they write out an application for a patent. They send it into the patent office, and then a patent examiner takes that application, reads it, understands every last detail of what this person has come up with, and then they go to the library and they search everything that's ever been written to see, has this ever been done before, and will this work? And I love that part of the job. Just lock me in the library and give me a bag lunch and come check on me tomorrow. I'll be fine. I love digging into the literature and learning stuff. Unfortunately, at some point, you have to come out of the library and you have to go argue with lawyers and you have to do all the administrative things. But, those kinds of jobs have always appealed to me. They appeal to my need to learn new stuff. They appeal to my need to dive deep into something. So that's a very long answer to a very simple question. I am a medical writer, and it works for me. And the autism is a big part of why it works for me.
Love how you've formulated it and how you've thankfully brought us on the story. Because one of the things that I was very excited to show to people today in our conversation is that there are places where the hyperfocus and the need to dive deeply into something that interests you will come together. And when you find that sweet spot, that old adagio of you won't find the work is almost true. Obviously, no job is always fun. I'm sure you have loads of parts of it which you absolutely abhor. If I had to wager without even asking, I'd suspect that there are moments when your RSD might kick in once you have to interact with others, and obviously all of those social mire of unclarity that we all have to deal with when we're autistic is certainly still there. No one gave you a shortcut from that.
All of the above are true. Yes, part of my job is the deep dive and the learning, and part of my job is talking to lots of people and explaining and arguing sometimes over that we can't say that. This is what we can say. So yes, there's a lot of the social aspect that is draining, but I know overall the statistics are terrible in the U.S. Something like 85% of autistic adults are unemployed, and I know that's true. And I've had situations at work that made it very clear to me that autistic people, not the job I have now, but I've had situations at other jobs where it was made clear to me that autistic people are not welcome.
Unfortunately,
so all that is true, but there are also jobs out there that are built for us. We are decision-making machines. We are analytical machines. And if we can find that spot we can thrive.
I love
We can be
that.
the
I
best
love
there
that
is in what we
perspective,
do.
and I knew you would put it that way. It's one of the reasons I really was keen on this conversation because I get a lot of stick online whenever I say that, kind of being neurodiverse can be a superpower as well. I immediately get shut down by hundreds of people telling me that's how very dare you. It's a disability and it's hard for everyone. And look, I'm very aware it's hard. I'm not putting that
Yeah.
down ever. But I
Yes.
also think that the more we find these magical fits where our makeup makes us the perfect candidate, the more likely it is that we'll thrive. And like you very well put it yourself, there are a number of occupations and positions and professions where our attributes, and they're not the same attributes for everyone, obviously, but your specific set of attributes will match something that will be exciting to you. And I think finding that is what matters. I often have this conversation with my little one who is kind of just trying to figure out what he wants to do. He actually does want to be biochemical engineer that is focused on research. So I think he's probably
Okay.
found that. It's found
Pretty
that, and
good.
he's
Yeah.
very interested in it. But we've had over the years all types of things that we've come up with, and he would always shut them down as I am not built like that. I could not ever do X, Y, and Z because I don't enjoy it and so on. Which I think is part of the fact that, the younger generation comes into the workforce with a much clearer view of who they really are than we ever had,
Yeah.
not having known who we are
Absolutely.
until 5
Yeah.
minutes ago.
And that knowledge of that level of self-awareness and that confidence to look at a job and say, nah, that's not going to work for me at all. I wish I had that 30 whatever years ago when I was looking for jobs. That is an attribute I really admire. And you're right. Autism is a disability. Legally and practically, it is a disability, and life is hard. There's stuff that's extremely difficult for me. I had to go to a conference for work, and be in a giant hotel room with 250 people, many of whom I didn't know. And that was
Right.
just incredibly uncomfortable for me. So, yes, it is hard. It is a disability. People don't like the term superpower, but let's be honest, there are skills, there are
Right.
traits that are useful. There are aspects of autism that are positive. And I think it's a disservice to only beat on the negative
Funny
and the
that you should
things that we can't.
mention conferences. I've always thought that I am somehow super defective for having to kind of have a ridiculous amount of downtime once I've interacted with loads and loads of people. And I had to, because I became a public
Mm-hmm.
speaker very early. I hated it all through, but such was life, and that's where my career was taking me. But equally, I knew very early
Right.
that to counteract that very intense moment of interaction, I will have to take a couple of days afterwards where I am in a dark room in a corner and I can kind of gather my strength again. And I think
Mm-hmm.
just knowing that about
Yes.
yourself is a mitigating factor, and it will keep people a lot more able to access jobs that otherwise would be difficult for them, just kind of understanding your own rhythm. And then obviously, and I think this is probably a topic we're going to hopefully touch on, the difference between what we went through and what the new generation is coming through is the topic of adaptation, and the fact that once you know who you are, the workplace you're in can offer some type of help in accommodating what you need. How I know that you're a really big advocate of offering the type of adaptation that whatever it is that people do need. And I was wondering, once you've discovered who you are and landed on that, what was that next stage to advocacy? What was the step to realizing that you should help others as well?
I did not disclose the first 3 years with my current employer because I had disclosed other places in the past and it had gone badly. So I was keeping it to myself. I went through a very difficult situation. My father got sick and eventually passed away. And the stress of dealing with all of that plus the work stress was too much. And it would be too much for anybody. There's nothing magic about autism in that case, but the stress was too much. I burned out completely at work. Autistic people, as you know, we tend to mask or camouflage. We know what's expected of us in an interaction with a neurotypical person, so we give them that. We make the eye contact. We do all the little social niceties we know we're supposed to. but it's
And
exhausting.
traumatizing.
And as my father was and traumatizing. Well, yeah, that's incredibly dangerous and harmful. Yes, and there's we could do a whole hour on that. But as I was dealing with the stress of my father passing away, I was able to mask less and less. And I got in trouble for being too harsh, being too aggressive at work, and and so I had to, in self-defense, come out and say, "Look, this is what's going on." After that, I didn't know what to do. I took some time away from work to deal with my father and to deal with the things I was going through. I had an account on LinkedIn already, so I thought, well, I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll say something about autism there, because a lot of the folks I work with are also on LinkedIn and are connected to me on LinkedIn. So I'll talk about autism a little bit on LinkedIn, and that'll sort of introduce the conversation when I get back to work, and we can talk about it or not. And that's as far as I had planned. I'll just start this conversation with the people I work with, but it grew. And one of my inspirations is a lady I work with at a meeting. She was talking about something, and she said, talking, and I'm autistic, so talking, and just didn't slow down, didn't look back, just said, I am autistic, and kept going. And that was like a magic trick. I didn't know you could do that. You can just say you're autistic. You can say it out loud and move on. So she really gave me the inspiration to say, okay, time to quit playing around. It's just time to say it out loud and let everybody know it. So I've been building my presence on LinkedIn, trying to be more and more active and more vocal there. I have created my own site, planetautism.net, partly because, practical reasons. There's a limit to how long a post can be on LinkedIn, and there's a limit to graphics. There's limits to lots of things. Partly because, like most autistic people, I have a need for autonomy. I need to be in charge. I need to be the one who decides things. And if I have my own site, then I'm the one who decides things. So I've built out. It's still a work in progress. I got a book I'm working on outlining. I'm trying to reach out further and further, and just get the message out that, look, you work with people who are autistic, whether you know it or not. Particularly if you're in a high-tech field. If you work in computers, I can promise you work with people who are autistic. But scientific fields, technical fields, you work with someone who is autistic. So here's how you talk to that person. Here's how you let that person thrive. Here's how
And
you get the most
thank
out
you
of
for all the
it.
work you've put into it, because every piece of advocacy builds towards kind of getting in a better spot for everyone. And I thank you for the story you had in terms of inspiration for disclosure. Those are kind of, to my mind, the two defining moments for us late diagnosed autistic people. That one, when it occurred to us that
Mhm.
that's kind of who we are, and when that penny drops and it all starts fitting and matching, and those puzzle pieces come to make up the we were all along. And then the second time, whether or not we wanted to disclose until that point, what happened that made people be a lot more vocal about who they are, in the online arena, if you wish, kind of on social media and so on. Thank you for that. It's really important that we say that, because I think we underestimate how important it is to speak about being autistic out loud. I have seen a trend of late, I don't know if you've noticed it as well, where people will be kind of under this shroud of anonymity online and say, I'm an autistic exec, or I'm a neurodiverse professional, without actually putting their name to it, which, I'm not
Mhm.
judging. I understand the reasons
Yep.
behind it all too well.
No,
But
I
equally,
get that.
I also know it's a missed opportunity for anyone young and anyone who hasn't had the courage to see an inspirational moment of, right, people like me. And if anything, I don't know if you agree or not, the ability for all of us to find a tribe and to feel like these humans are like me is probably the biggest win that social media could have given us over the last 10 years or so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's one of the key differences between my generation, the next generation is they've grown up online and connected, and having a friend, halfway around the world is no big deal for them. Once I got really into the social media and started looking around, there are a lot of very active autistic communities online, and just to have someone say, "Yeah, I get that. No, you're not crazy. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know why people always say do this when they mean do that." Just having someone to tell you it's okay. You're not broken or defective or wrong. Your brain just works a little bit differently, and the way you see the world is 100% logical to you, and it's all good.
The
So
validity
that
we
was
get out
huge.
of that, I think, cannot be underestimated. I had a bit of a
Yeah,
debate earlier in the
absolutely.
week with someone in my team who was saying, well, we can't always rely on the dopamine hit we get when we realize we are like other people. And I beg to differ. I think we should rely on it. And their argument was, well, at the end of the day, we now get the same exact 10 traits that we all relate to, and how many more times do we need to say that? And that's what's annoying the neurotypicals. And my reaction was that I'm
Yeah,
fine with them being annoyed for as long as they like. We spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years not understanding what's happening to us, and have to go through situations that were traumatic. And I don't think it's that traumatic for neurotypical people to have to see the same 10 traits that will make your day better. So go ahead and get your dopamine from there. It's not gonna
yeah,
break the bank.
there you go.
So,
I mean, if they ever actually learn it all and it stops
right.
being an issue, we'll stop talking about it. Yeah, we'll make it.
Very
Yeah,
good point. Very good point.
yeah. I
How
agree.
many
We need
people
to
do
keep
you
talking.
think, and this is I know it's a question of exaggeration, and no one really wants to put numbers on anything, but
Mhm.
if you were to put your money on red or
Mhm.
black, would you say that there are the numbers that we have around the incidence of autism are anywhere close to reality, or are we looking more at a, I don't know, a larger percentage of people or a majority of
I think
people? I've heard it all over the last few episodes.
right. I think the official estimates are still too low. I think a lot of people are still looking at a very restricted definition of what autism is. And I think one of the most exciting things that's happening now is we're learning, hey, autism is also, and autism can also. And so I think if we ever got a real working definition of what autism is, we would find that a lot more people fit that definition. If you're going to go back to the 40 or the 60-year-old definitions, then yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't fit that, but that was never the right definition in the first place. So, and yes, we're
Mm.
seeing a lot more autistic people than we used to. That's because they used to be invisible. That's because they used to hide, and there was no way to find them. So I think the official stats are still too low. I don't know what the real number is. People talk about 2% of the worldwide population. No, I think we're significantly higher than that. And I'm hoping someday we figure it out. I'm not sure that we will, barring
Mm.
massive breakthroughs in technology that let us know more about how the brain works. But
Maybe it won't matter at all.
um,
Maybe we'll get to
I
a
think
place
it's
where
much
it
harder.
won't matter.
At some point, that's the ideal. It doesn't matter. I don't know your blood type, and I don't care. I don't need to know your blood type. We could have a conversation regardless, and that is a biological factor that is inherent to you and very important in certain situations. If you need a transfusion, but I don't need to know that about you. It's all fine. So I would hope someday we can get to the point where
Mm.
you're autistic. Huh? Okay. Like, oh, you're left-handed. Okay. I just hope it becomes just another thing.
You're right. The
It's going to be a
delta is
while.
going to be an interesting road to travel, and I think to a degree we sort of contradict ourselves. On the one hand, I keep saying that we need more people to disclose. We need more people to inspire others by saying, "I have been autistic all my life, whether or not it fits your definition or not. It doesn't matter. This
Right.
is who I am." And equally, we say, "Well, maybe it won't matter whatsoever, and we can just be mindful of the fact that the world is a diverse canvas, and we can all be finding the adaptation we need just for needing it and not because of our neurological makeup. But I don't think they are at all in opposition with each other. I think we need both things happening until we get to a
Oh,
place where the world is capable. But if you look around yourself in kind of around your colleagues and in your job today, obviously loads and loads of other people would be autistic. Do they disclose? Do you feel like there's a lot more disclosure than there used to be?
there is more than there used to be. Yes, because I stand up and say I am autistic, a lot of people reach out to me privately and say, I'm autistic too. So I know that there are many autistic people that I work with who will never say it, who are not yet to the point where they're going to say that out loud, or they're going to admit that to anybody. So I think disclosure is becoming somewhat more common, but
Right.
it's still just
And
the
is
tip of the
that
iceberg.
for the reasons that people would assume are the common reasons, which is that there is a fear of repercussions?
Yes, I would like to dress it up, but yes, I have had situations where at previous jobs where I went in and told the head of HR, hey, I'm autistic. And she looked at me like I was insane or a serial killer or contagious. I'm not sure what that look was exactly, but she could not get me out of her office fast enough. And she was the head of HR. Of all the people at the company, she ought to have had some understanding. But I've also had smaller situations at work. Once people know you're autistic, oh, well, David wouldn't want to lead that project. Well, David wouldn't want to be involved in that. Yeah, David would like to lead that project. Why don't you ask David what he wants instead of just assuming I can't? So there is a lot of fear of repercussion. There's a lot of social fear of being the other. He's not one of us. He's one of them. And so it's fear
And I think
driven.
obviously
Absolutely.
that's super sad. And in particular, and this does apply only to really the segment of us that have been diagnosed late or have started disclosing late. In my case, it's both. I've only found out when I was an adult, I guess I was 20 something. But having known all along, I have spent 20 years in the industry not talking about it because I was convinced I would never kind of accede to the positions I wanted to accede to, and I would never kind of climb the ladder. I would never be able to
Mhm.
lead teams and so on and so forth. And all of that could have possibly been the case if I had said something earlier than when I was forced to. So I completely understand why, in particular, once you've gotten to a certain place, and in particular in industries where the competition is acerbic, you would be very, very reluctant, if not find it impossible to talk about it. And there's also the fact that you very well touched
Right.
on earlier, that there's a lot of self-denial. We're not exactly very willing to admit it to ourselves, to our families, and so on. And then
Yeah.
that begs the question, are we, you and I, as autistic people who have unmasked, have disclosed, have gone through that process, are we saying it's necessarily better on the other side? Should people disclose and should people unmask? Or does that not necessarily make enough of a life quality jump to be worth the pain?
I think people talk about unmasking as if it's all or nothing, and I don't think that's true. I am vocal. I am on LinkedIn for whoever wants to hear it. I'm doing podcasts. I'm writing a book. I do not hide the fact that I am autistic, but there are aspects of my life that I don't talk about. There are situations where I behave in the way I'm expected to behave. The mask is still there. I've cut away a lot of it. It's a lot more transparent than it used to be, but it's still there. If I'm in a crowd full of people I don't know and will never see again, I'll pretend to be like everybody else just to get through it, But so, unmasking is not absolute. It's a process, and B, there are ways to let the mask slip just a tiny bit. You can go to your boss and say, I work best when I have a chance to really focus on what I'm doing. Would it be okay if for an hour and a half in the morning and an hour and a half in the afternoon, I close my email and I close my instant messenger and I really focus on my work, and I'll answer all my email before the day is over, but I just need that time to really work and be productive. You can ask for that without saying, hey, I'm I have ADHD and I'm really easily distracted. And every time my email dings or the instant messenger light flashes, I get distracted and I lose everything. I have to start over from scratch. You can ask for things and explain what you need without using the word accommodation or autism or ADHD or whatever. So there are small steps that you can take um, toward unmasking. Your question basically is it worth it? Yeah, overall, yeah. But you need to be careful. As autistic people, it's hard for us to know who to trust. We tend to communicate literally and assume that people mean what they say, which is not true always. So it is a process. You will get hurt now and again when you unmask to the wrong person, but when you start building up those people around you where you can let the mask down some and be who you are, that's such a gift. It's so wonderful. It feeds you, and that conversation can actually feed you instead of drain you. If the person you're talking to understands that I'm not going to make eye contact. That doesn't mean I'm bored or ignoring you or whatever. It just means I can either listen to you or I can look like I'm listening to you, but I can't do both. Once you build up your core group of people who know enough of who you are to let you be more of who you are.
I love that.
It's a
I love
wonderful
how you.
experience. Yes, it's worth it.
I love
Be
how
careful.
you phrase that. So it's not an all or nothing thing. I think that's an important message for everyone to understand. You can and you should probably, if you get to choose and you're not forced to unmask and disclose like some of us have been, then you have the luxury of better finding out in the ability of having the support of those that you can count on, and then it does indeed pay off, and then it does indeed make sense, and then it is indeed worth it, kind of without a doubt. I have yet to meet, despite having met many people who have had struggles with this, I have yet to meet anyone who says definitely don't do it, mistake, and I wish I could go straight back to the closet. And I think that comes with almost anything and any type of disclosure you have to do. It's not necessarily specific to autism. It's queer people have gone through the same process of having to figure out whether or not they speak about who they are, and it always pays off eventually, but it is painful meanwhile, and it can be traumatic and problematic meanwhile. But I like that, having a way to better comprehend who you are and then take that to your employer in ways that simply fit the gaps of where your adaptation doesn't need to be made in a piece of paper. Hereby you have been adapted correctly, but it's simply feeding your workflow better is probably a good place to start. I like that.
And if you go to your manager and they support that idea, okay, sure, you can have an hour and a half of quiet time morning and afternoon. Then maybe you go back to them with the next thing. It would also help if once you've done that one thing and proven, wow, I'm so much more productive now, and there've been no negative consequences. Now you go to your boss with the second thing. It would also help if I could have some different lighting in the office. The light, you can say, oh, the light hurts my eyes. You don't have to say because I'm autistic and I'm sensitive to certain lights. But and then okay, see how that goes. Well, he lets you do something different with the lighting, and when that pays off, and he's for little or no cost, you're even more productive. Go back to him again. So you can sort of take it incrementally. When someone proves to you that they're an ally and proves to you that they care, then you can start thinking about taking the mask off completely. People ask me all the time, I just found out I'm autistic. Should I disclose that? And my response is, how does disclosing it benefit you? Never mind your boss. Never mind anybody else. Will disclosing this make your life better? And if you don't see how it's going to make your life better, then why don't you wait a little bit? Because once you've done it, you're not going to undo it. So let's think about it carefully before we dive into that.
I can see why having a cautious approach is super important in some instances. One thing that I do say I think works across the board, and it's a big supposition, but I like to believe it's the case, is once you know what kind of needs you have, and then let's not forget that's a really big step. It can take you months, years until you've landed on what it is that makes you most
Yeah.
productive or most high performing and so on. But once you know that, what I think really works is attempting exchange of readme exercise within your team, because once you get it down and you know that these are the ways in which I work best, if you were to encourage that everyone else gets
Mhm.
through that same exercise, whether autistic or not, they simply hand each other a
Mhm.
piece of electronic data that says these are the things that would make me most productive. It doesn't, again, need to be categorized as an adaptation for autism, but simply in an ideal world, the way I would work through my day is this. And I think once
Yeah.
that exchange happens, you can tell that
Absolutely.
whether or not you have a label, the need for being more productive is not in your best interest because you're trying to be a such and such, but in the best interest of the entire team. So that can work.
Right. And that's a point I wish more managers understood. The things that I need, I don't have special needs. The things that I need, everybody else needs too. I need them a little more intensely, but everybody needs them. My boss comes to me and says, "Can you do whatever? Can you do this?"
Mhm.
To me, that's a question. Do you have the physical ability, the time, the resources to do this? Are you able to do this? But to my boss, that's a command.
Right.
Can you do this means do this. And I'm going to start asking questions. What exactly do you need? When do you need it? How do you need it? Why do you need it? And the boss is going to get frustrated and say, "Can you do this or not?" And I'm going to get frustrated. I don't know. I don't know what this is yet. Clear communication of expectations would help me tell you if I can do that or not. And clear communication of
Right.
expectations would help everybody. We've all had a project at some point where we knew we were supposed to be doing something and it was really important to somebody that we do something, but we don't know what it is. And all the time and all the frustration and all the money in that situation, we could have avoided all of that if you just give me some clear written instructions at the outset. So absolutely sit down with your entire department and say, hey, what would help us? What would help us communicate with each other better? And never bring up the word autism or neurodiversity or disability or whatever,
Right.
and just have that conversation. And then
Mm.
most importantly, follow through. If your team tells you we want more explicit written communication, then do that and keep
Right.
doing that and keep doing that. Because that's how you build the trust. That's how someone's going to come to you later with something else if they see, okay, she gets it. I told her this is what I needed, and
Mhm.
she gave it to me, and yeah, okay. Now
Exceptional
she's somebody
points
I can
there.
talk
I'll unpack them a little bit. First off, the need for clear communication, ideally written and ideally delivered in a way that doesn't necessarily make us completely put our backs up and be RSD'd on either side of the communication scheme, is key in every work
to.
situation,
Right.
really. And then the fact that we don't have special needs, we just have needs. And that's not special to autistic people. Every worker you have in your team, whether or
Sure.
not they are
Sure.
autistic or not, will have those needs. But realistically, we live in a world where your specific needs, so that you give the best you have at work, are not exactly at the forefront of anyone's mind. You well pointed out earlier that unfortunately
Sure.
HR is more of a disconnected function these days, and yeah, it's a tough world from the point of view of different types of needs that the employees do and do not have, whether or not we are autistic. I think it's important that we don't skirt over the fact that it's not an easy job market either, and everyone knows that.
No, no.
It's, we're in the middle of hundreds of thousands of people, in particular in our industries, in science and in technology, having been let go. So that puts a lot more pressure on people to not be immediately disclosing or asking for adaptation that they need. And we completely understand that. We're not denying that's the case.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
was going to ask you a couple of things in terms
Absolutely.
of your specific ideas on how to make your own um, habitat and your own workflow better. Like, how do you deal, if you have any kind of tips
Hmm.
at all, how do you deal with those moments where you feel like you're very valuable and honest questions that you were mentioning before, for instance, or your need for clarity
Mhm.
is interpreted as being recalcitrant or not being willing to do the thing. How do you get yourself over the, instead of getting a medal for my contribution, I am being seen as obstructive?
Yeah. That is still something that I'm working on. Like many autistic people, I don't always I'm not fully aware of my facial expression or my tone of voice. I'm told that when I'm concentrating or frustrated or tired, my facial expressions and tone of voice tend to shift more toward angry, even if I'm not. And so, as I'm trying to explain something and not being heard, apparently I begin to sound more and more angry, whether whether I mean to or not, and that makes people defensive. But of course, I can't read the fact that they're starting to feel defensive because I'm not good at reading other people's tone of voice or facial expressions either. And so things tend to escalate. So in my head, I try to step back. I try to, okay, let's take a breath. Here's, I'm not angry. I'm just trying to understand and just lay it out, you know,
Mhm.
try to diffuse the emotions of the situation, which is easier for me because I'm autistic and I wasn't that emotional about it in the first place. But being aware that, okay, this person's probably feeling like I'm questioning their authority. This person is probably feeling threatened because I'm a big guy and now I look angry. And this person, it might be feeling this, it might be feeling that. And so, okay, what do we do with that? So people talk about emotional intelligence and empathy, and autistic people certainly have those traits. We're not always great at expressing those traits. We're not always great at letting people know that we have empathy or that we understand them. So I try to make myself step back and consciously
You just
think
sounded
through
more
some of those things.
emotionally intelligent than most people I've heard of. So I would disagree tremendously. I think, yeah, I see what you mean, but absolutely, that sounds like a lot of empathy and thought that goes into attempting to adapt yourself to how they would read the situation. And
Yeah,
is that something that you feel
yeah,
has been part of it being taxing? I don't know if you feel the same way, that we have had to at all times understand by numbers how
yeah,
our approach might come across to others and just adapt to it. That's a little bit part of our burnout, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah. It is. I mean, for every conversation, the neurotypical person is doing the neurotypical half of the conversation, and we're doing their half plus our autistic half, translating from them to us. It's having a conversation in the language that you just kind of barely speak sometimes, or that you studied a long time ago and used to know but don't anymore. It is a lot of thought, a lot of how do I say this? Okay, he's saying that. What does that really mean?
Yeah.
So yes, we are working
Very,
a whole
very
lot
true.
harder in those
Very
conversations
true.
than the neurotypical people. And yes,
Yeah.
it burns out.
It's
Absolutely.
just part of something we're going to have to be honest about, and hopefully there's going to be less and less of this as the world moves on and as humans come into the workplace with a clear sense of who they are and what they need and what their boundaries are and what they expect out of others. Hopefully those, and
Yeah.
communication is a lot clearer. Hopefully these situations will be less and less of them. Yes, so far, to be honest, to
I hope so.
those of us that are around this generational moment, we have had to do a lot of the work to translate ourselves to a neurotypical world in
Yeah.
a way that doesn't get their RSD reaction up either. And I think, yeah, that's, we have to be honest that there's a lot of burnout from that point of view, and something that we should be mindful of. And also, equally, we were talking earlier about unmasking, that does come with a price that's also sometimes really easily
Mhm.
translatable into a moment of extreme burnout. But I think being aware of it is possibly
Yeah.
going to make people get over it a lot easier than to think that they have a combination between anxiety, depression, trauma, which, like you very well pointed out, are all part of the baggage we are now lugging around thanks to all these years. But I think it's
Yeah.
important to know that you can kind of
Yeah.
prepare for it and think, right, that might be a moment where
Yeah.
where my house of cards might fall over, but when I put it back together, I'll be a much more rounded up me. I think I love how you've presented it, and I think your advocacy is making a really big impact. I'm very thankful to see the things you put out online. I hope people go to, is it planetautism.org or .com? .net, planetautism.net.
Planetautism.net.
.net.
.com,
Yes.
.net.
And I
Very
hope
important.
they find you online on LinkedIn and continue the conversation. Thank you so much for the episode and for chatting to us today, David. And I hope to have you back sometime soon.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for giving me a chance to get some things off my chest. So have a great day.